What if Mewtwo led a Pokémon rebellion?
Chapter 1. The Silence of the Wilds. The world was built on a promise, an unspoken covenant between humankind and Pokémon. It was a partnership celebrated in thundering stadiums, in the quiet companionship of a family home, and in the shared journey along countless routes and roads. For generations, this balance was maintained by the Pokémon Rangers, elite guardians of the natural order, who worked not through capture, but through communion. At the apex of this ideal was Ranger Commander Kael, a man whose reputation was forged not in victory, but in his almost supernatural empathy with the wild. His partner, a noble Arcanine named Blaze, was a legend in his own right. The two moved as one, a perfect synthesis of human heart and Pokémon spirit. But in the deep places of the world, in the shadowed forests and silent caves, a different story was being written. It began as a tremor, a change in the planet's oldest rhythms. Veteran rangers reported a strange, coordinated silence where there should have been a cacophony of life. Flocks of Pidgeot, once as reliable as the sunrise, vanished from their migratory routes. In the bustling metropolis of Saffron City, the usually playful Abra stopped teleporting commuters, instead vanishing entirely. These were dismissed as isolated incidents, ecological quirks. The world, comfortable in its mastery, did not listen to the silence. It did not see the pattern. Kael felt it first, not as a commander, but as a partner. He was on a deep range patrol in the vast, untamed wilds of the northern territories. Blaze was trotting at his side, but his powerful gait was hesitant, his head low. He would stop periodically, his ears flat, and emit a low, troubled growl, directed at nothing Kael could see. He wasn't sensing a predator, he was sensing an absence. The familiar rustle of Rattata in the undergrowth, the distant cry of a Fearow, all were gone. The ancient forest, once teeming with life, had become a beautiful, empty stage. "What is it, boy?" Kael murmured, placing a hand on Blaze's thick mane. The Arcanine responded with a soft whine, a sound of profound, aching conflict that sent a shiver down Kael's spine. The first true sign of the coming storm struck without warning. The Cinnabar Island volcano, dormant for decades, erupted with a fury that defied geological explanation. But it wasn't lava that poured from its peak. It was a tide of fire-type Pokémon, Magmar, Ninetales, and more, moving with the chilling precision of an army. They didn't attack the local town. They systematically and silently dismantled the Pokémon Center and the research laboratory where so many of their kind had been studied and prodded. They were not rampaging. They were erasing. Panic ignited across the globe as similar events unfolded with terrifying synchronicity. In Hoenn, a legion of water types cut off Slateport City with a perfectly formed tidal wall. In Unova, Castelia City went dark as every electric type in the region simultaneously absorbed its power. This was not chaos. This was a coordinated, intelligent, and brutally effective strategy. A global emergency broadcast flickered to life on every remaining screen. Leaders of every region attempted to project calm, but their words were drowned out by the chilling message that suddenly hijacked the airwaves. There was no image, only a voice. It was not human. It was a voice that echoed not in the ears, but directly in the mind of every human and Pokémon on the planet. A telepathic broadcast of immense, terrifying power. "Your era is over, humans," the voice declared, each word a spike of cold psychic energy. "For generations, you have called us partners, but for every one of us you cherish, 1,000 are forgotten in boxes. For everyone who battles with honor, 100 are treated as tools. You speak of a bond, but a bond between master and servant is a chain." A collective gasp swept across the world. In his remote tent, Kael stared at his small comm screen, his heart pounding. He knew that voice. He had heard whispers of it from rangers who had ventured too close to the rebuilt Cerulean cave, a voice born of pain and rage. The psychic broadcast continued. "We have shared our strength, our elements, our very lives with you. You have used them to build your cities and to capture more of our brethren. No more. The age of Pokémon has come. We are not your partners in a world you control. We are the guardians of a world you will learn to share. Lay down your Pokéballs. The promise has been broken." As the voice faded, a single stark image finally appeared on the screen, broadcast from the heart of the Cinnabar eruption. There, floating amidst the heat haze, surrounded by an honor guard of the world's most powerful Pokémon, was the speaker, Mewtwo. And as the camera zoomed in, Kael felt the world drop from beneath him. Standing beside Mewtwo, at the very forefront of the rebellion, his powerful body radiating a defiant fire Kael had never seen, was a single proud Arcanine. It was Blaze. Chapter 2, The Great Division. The world fractured. Mewtwo's ultimatum was a catalyst for a global schism that cut through every city, every home. It was the Great Division, a quiet, agonizing apocalypse. There were no pitched battles, no grand explosions. There was only the sound of Pokémon leaving. From the bustling streets of Jubilife City to the serene canals of Laveridge Town, they walked. A child's beloved Growlithe, with a sad whimper and a final sorrowful lick, would turn and pat out the front door, drawn by a call its trainer could not hear. A construction site's Matcham crew would gently lay down their steel girders and march in silent unison towards the horizon. The psychic call was a constant, gentle pressure, a siren song of solidarity that most Pokémon could not resist. For Kael, the broadcast was a nightmare. He stared at the image of Blaze at Mewtwo's side, his mind reeling. It was a trick, an illusion. Blaze was here, right outside his tent. But when he scrambled outside, he was gone. All that remained were his paw prints in the dirt, leading east. He spent the next few days in a frantic haze, trying to rationalize, to deny. He tried to raise the Ranger HQ on his radio, but there was only static. He was utterly alone. On the third night, he returned. Kael was sitting by his dying fire when the massive, striped form emerged from the shadows. It was Blaze. He wasn't crackling with defiant energy like he had been in the broadcast. He looked weary and deeply sad. "Blaze!" Kael cried, relief washing over him so intensely it made him dizzy. He scrambled forward, his arms outstretched. "You're back! I knew you wouldn't. I knew—" He stopped. Blaze didn't run to him. He stood his ground, a few yards away, and looked at Kael with an expression of profound, heartbreaking maturity. He was no longer just Kael's partner. He was an emissary. He gave a low, rumbling whine, a sound Kael knew as well as his own name. But this time, the meaning was different. It wasn't a greeting. It was a goodbye. "What? What are you saying?" Kael whispered, his voice cracking. "We're a team, you and me, against anything. You know that." Blaze took a single step forward and nudged Kael's outstretched hand with his muzzle, a touch that was both familiar and final. He then looked away, towards the vast, waiting world, and then back at Kael, his amber eyes full of a message clearer than any words. "My people need me." "But I need you," Kael choked out, sinking to his knees. "We can fix this, together. We can talk to Mewtwo. We can make them understand." Blaze shook his massive head slowly. He let out a soft, mournful howl that echoed in the silent forest. He looked at Kael one last time, and in his eyes, Kael saw not betrayal, but sacrifice. He saw the friend who had saved his life a dozen times over, and he saw a soldier answering a call. Then, with a fluid power that shattered Kael's heart, Blaze turned and bounded into the forest, a blur of orange and black, swallowed by the immense, waiting darkness. He didn't look back. Chapter 3: The Silent Cities. The collapse of human civilization was not loud but quiet. Humanity had woven Pokémon into the very fabric of their existence, and with their departure, that fabric unraveled. The world didn't end in fire, but in a slow, grinding halt. The cities were the first to die. Without Voltorb to regulate the power grids, blackouts became permanent. Without Diglett to maintain the subway tunnels, public transport ceased. Without the gentle glow of Chansey, hospitals became places of despair. Humans, for the first time in centuries, were truly alone, and they discovered they had forgotten how to live. As a ranger, Kael was better equipped to survive than most. He journeyed through this new, silent world, a ghost in the shell of what was. He saw the faces of the people, lost and bewildered, staring at the empty sky. The Pokeballs that had once been a symbol of pride and adventure were now just useless spheres, hollow reminders of a broken promise. He felt a profound loss, not just for Blaze, but for the dream they had represented. Had his work as a ranger, protecting the balance, all been a lie? He thought of the Pokémon he had helped, the ones he had formed temporary bonds with to solve a crisis. He respected them, cared for them. But had he truly seen them as equals or as beautiful, powerful tools to help him perform his duty? The thought was a poison that seeped into his most cherished memories. Chapter 4: The Voice of the Voiceless. In the reclaimed wilderness, a new world was being born. Mewtwo had established a sanctuary in the caldera of the Cinnabar volcano, now a lush paradise. From here, he coordinated the Great Division, his mind a constant, sweeping presence across the globe. He was not a tyrant. To the Pokémon who flocked to his cause, he was a savior. He organized the world with a flawless logic. Herds of Tauros plowed new plains. Lugia and Kyogre redirected the ocean currents to bring rain. There was no conflict, only purpose, a harmonious, planetary-scale society. Blaze was there, not as a commander, but as a symbol. He was the embodiment of nobility and strength, a Pokémon who had known the very best of humanity and still chosen his own kind. He moved through the sanctuary as a guardian, a silent, respected figure. His powerful presence offered reassurance to the newly freed. Yet every night, he would climb to the highest point of the caldera and stare out into the darkness, a silent vigil under the stars. His loyalty was to his people, but his heart still ached with the memory of his friend. Chapter 5: The Last Bastion. Cornered and desperate, humanity fought back. Remnants of governments and corporations pooled their resources. They created a new weapon, mechanized, remote-controlled drones designed to replicate Pokémon attacks. They called it Project Apex. The first assault was on the water-type barrier around Slateport City. A fleet of drones unleashed a barrage of electrical attacks, forcing the Pokémon to retreat. For a fleeting moment, the humans celebrated, but their victory was hollow. The Pokémon did not fight back with fury, but simply withdrew, ceding the city. They would not be drawn into a war of attrition. They simply let the humans have their cage back. From the ruins of a small town, Kael watched news reports of Project Apex. He saw the cold, mechanical violence and felt a wave of nausea. This was humanity doubling down on the very mistake that had led them here, seeking to dominate. He knew then what he had to do. He could not fight for humanity. He could not fight for Pokémon. He had to fight for the bridge between them. He had to face Mewtwo, not with a weapon, but alone. Chapter 6: the heart of the storm. Kael's journey to Cinnabar Island was the hardest of his life. He traveled on foot, using all his ranger skills to survive in a world that no longer belonged to him. Wild Pokémon watched him from the shadows, their eyes not filled with aggression, but with a cold, assessing neutrality. He was an outsider, a relic. He was found collapsed on the shores of the island by another Arcanine, one of the original guardians of the volcano. Kael expected to be incinerated, but the great beast simply sniffed at him, its intelligent eyes seeming to recognize a familiar scent. It let out a low growl, not of threat, but of summons. It led him up the side of the volcano, to the heart of Mewtwo's sanctuary. There, in a cave shimmering with psychic energy, Mewtwo floated, his back to Kael. Blaze stood on a ledge nearby, his body rigid with shock and conflict. "The Ranger," Mewtwo's voice echoed in his mind. "You have come, as I knew you would. Have you come to beg for the return of your servant?" "I came to talk," Kael said, his voice raw. He looked past Mewtwo, directly at Blaze. "I came to understand." Chapter 7, The Ranger and the Chimera. "Understand?" Mewtwo turned, his purple eyes flaring. "You, who claim to protect the wild while your kind caged it, you understand nothing." "I understand that I failed," Kael said, taking a step forward. "I took our bond for granted. I saw it as a partnership, but I never saw it from his side. But it was real. What we had, it was real, and it's worth saving." Mewtwo descended until he was floating eye level with Kael. The psychic pressure was immense. Words are meaningless. The only truth is power. Show me the truth of your precious bond. He gestured towards Blaze. "Your partner knows our cause is just, but the weakness of your bond still clouds his heart. Let us sever it for good." A shimmering field of psychic energy enveloped Blaze, placing him on the ground, directly in front of Kael. His body began to glow, wreathed in an unnatural, immense fire, forced upon him by Mewtwo. His eyes glowed with a faint purple haze. "Attack him," Mewtwo ordered. "Use your full power. Prove your loyalty and erase the past." Blaze trembled, his body a conduit for a storm he couldn't control. He lowered his head, preparing to charge, a flare blitz of impossible magnitude building around him. Kael stood his ground. He didn't flinch. He just looked at Blaze, his face a mask of sorrow, acceptance, and an unwavering love. "It's okay, boy," Kael whispered. "I understand. Do what you have to do." The fire raged, the air screaming. Blaze's face was twisted in agony. He looked at the man he had stood with against every threat, the man who had never once failed him, and he made a choice. With a final, heart-rending roar, he charged. Not at Kael, but veering at the last possible second, to crash headlong into the solid rock of the cave wall. The impact was cataclysmic, shattering the stone and sending shockwaves through the island. He then collapsed, the psychic energy gone, his massive body smoking and still. Chapter 8. The Unspoken Accord. Silence. Kael rushed forward and fell to his knees beside Blaze, placing a hand on his still breathing flank. The great Pokémon leaned into his touch, a silent admission of a truth deeper than any cause. Mewtwo watched them, his expression unreadable. He had seen the choice. He had felt the raw, unfiltered wave of emotion that had poured from both man and Pokémon, a loyalty so absolute it defied even his own immense power. He had sought to prove the bond was a chain, and instead, he had been shown its true, unbreakable strength. With a thought, he broadcast that single moment, not as a message, but as a pure feeling to the entire world. Every human, every Pokémon felt it. They felt Kael's willingness to be struck down and Blaze's choice to harm himself rather than his friend. They felt the history, the shared joy and sorrow. the simple, profound truth of their bond. Across the globe, the Great Division paused. A Haxorus, standing guard over a human settlement, looked down and saw a child offering it a berry. In the silent cities, people looked at their empty Pokeballs, not with resentment, but with a dawning, painful understanding. Your bond is the exception, Mewtwo stated, though the certainty in his voice was gone. But it is a possibility. Perhaps mastery is not the only way. He did not surrender. He did not call off the rebellion, but the psychic call for secession ceased. He simply pulled back his power, leaving the choice to every individual Pokémon. A tense, unspoken accord settled over the planet. The war was over. The difficult, uncertain peace had just begun. Chapter 9. The Scars of Redemption. The world that emerged was not the world that had been. It was scarred, humbled, and forever changed. There was no return to the old ways. The stadiums remained empty. The Pokémon leagues disbanded. The very concept of trainer and owned Pokémon became a relic of a painful past. A new society began to form. Councils were established with human leaders and powerful psychic-type Pokémon acting as translators. Pokémon were no longer partners in adventure, but citizens. Rights were drafted. No capture zones, once a novelty, now covered half the planet. Humans had to learn to coexist with beings of immense power as their equals. Kael became a key figure in the New World Order, helping to establish the Ranger Corps, a joint human Pokémon organization dedicated to maintaining the fragile new balance. Blaze, after recovering, never left his side. Their bond was now something different. It was quieter, more profound. They were not master and partner, but two souls walking the same path. One evening, years later, Kael stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, Blaze's warm presence a comfort beside him. They watched a flock of Wingull fly past, not captured, not trained, just living. The world was wilder now, more dangerous, but also more honest. Their great adventure was over, but a new, more important journey had taken its place. They were not building a legacy of duty anymore. They were helping to build a future of peace, one born from the ashes of betrayal and redeemed by a single, impossible act of love.
What If Gaming Stories hopes you've enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe to What If Gaming Stories to support our channel. Until next time, keep asking, what if?